So we're starting on the mind-body problem, and this is pretty much the fundamental problem that's going to underlie every other philosophical problem that we look at for the rest of the term, right? So this is an important one to understand. It's great to know all of the theories that we're going to discuss, and you'll need to know them for the final, but the greatest thing you can get out of this is just understanding what the issue is here with the mind-body problem, the philosophical issue, and understanding that the way one chooses to solve the problem, whichever argument you get behind as far as a solution to the mind-body problem is concerned, is going to kind of logically determine or should logically determine your views on personal identity and free will, right? Because they're deeply connected to this problem. Okay, let's go. So first, it pays to distinguish between physical states and mental states, because that's really what's going on here. When you say the mind-body problem, it's really the mind-brain problem, right? Mind versus brain. Mind stuff or mental stuff versus brain stuff or physical stuff. Okay, so let's just take a look at some qualities of this so we can get that distinction down. So brain states or our physical states, and they're quantitative, means that you can count them and measure them, right? So for instance, height, weight, shape, size, texture, electrical reactions, chemical reactions, those are all quantitative. They're quantifiable states of the brain that can be measured either with the senses or with instrumentation and technology. Mental states, however, are what's known as qualitative. You can't measure them, right? You can't see them with or sense them with your sensory organs. You can't weigh them, right? But you can qualitatively discuss them, right? So for instance, thoughts you can't measure thoughts, but you can describe them qualitatively, right? And beliefs, intentionality, sensations, emotions, self-awareness, reason, the process of reason itself. All of these are qualitative, and dreams as well. So it's important to make that distinction. When we're talking about the mind versus the body, it's best to think of it as the mind-brain problem. Mental stuff versus physical stuff problem. So let's get a working definition of consciousness. And that's very difficult, and it's still a contentious problem to this day. Hard to define, but you know it when you have it, if that's satisfactory. Roughly, it includes the capacity that our minds have to be aware of our mental states and have intentionality to mean something with the things that we say and what we do and how we plan. Right? And then a strict definition of the mind-brain problem is how do the mind or consciousness and the body or brain relate to each other? In other words, how can there be a causal relationship between the immaterial and the material? So before we look at these different theories particularly, let me give you a scheme here. There's two traditional camps, and we discussed dualism and monism in the lecture video quiz for last week. But let's take a look at those, how these theories divide up. So in the dualistic camp, so remember that dualism means if you're a dualist, you think there's two kinds of stuff that make up the universe. There's material stuff and there's immaterial stuff. And monists don't believe there's two kinds of stuff in the universe. You either think there's only material stuff or there's only immaterial stuff, which sounds weird, but it should remind you of Berkeley. Anyway, so for the dualistic camp, we've got these three approaches: interactionism, parallelism, and epiphenomenalism. And then on the monist side, there are the idealists and the materialists. There's others, and there's other splinter groups, but for our purposes, this will do. There's idealism, like I said, and materialism. And the materialism group has many splinter groups, and we've got to look at a few of them, like identity theory, functionalism, and eliminative materialism. So first, let's take a look at interactionism. You know, the whole mind-body problem in its current state, even if that state has become more sophisticated, is thought to begin with Descartes. Philosophers and thinkers credit Descartes for being the first to formulate this problem in a way that started people thinking about it in ways they'd never thought about it before, right? So here's Descartes, and he believed, well, he didn't call it interactionism. We call it that in retrospect, but he was an interactionist, which basically means that the mind and the body, right, or consciousness and brain, seem to causally interact. And the question remains, though, just how do they do this, right? Just like you read about Descartes, right? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. He can be more certain of thought than he can of physicality, right? And first and foremost, he exists as a thinking thing, thought being primary. And the question, he realized, look, there's a problem here. How can immaterial stuff like thought and material stuff like body or flesh causally interact with one another? How does this happen? And he proposed that it happens in this tiny gland in your brain called the pineal gland. And that this is the seat of, he thought, this is the seat of the interaction between the soul and the body. It's a real trip. And he was actually, people have made fun of him through the years for thinking this. And there's been recent science that says maybe we shouldn't have been laughing that quickly. Anyway, look up that gland. Some people pronounce it as pineal gland. I've always been taught pineal gland, but tomato, tomato. Okay, so that's interactionism, right? He's basically saying soul stuff or mind stuff, mental stuff, immaterial stuff causally interacts with material stuff. And it can go both ways. The material can affect the immaterial, and the immaterial can affect the material causally. But think about this for a moment. And this posed a big problem for thinkers like Descartes. And it continues to this day, right? The law of conservation of energy says the total energy of an isolated system cannot change. It's conserved over time. And if the mental and the physical causally interact, then somehow mental energy is converted into physical energy. And at the point of conversion, one would expect a physically inexplicable increase in the energy present in the system. So the cool analogy or metaphor is that it's like supposing that imaginary locomotives can pull real boxcars. There seems to be something fundamentally wrong with this proposal, right? From a scientific point of view. And this philosopher named Owen Flanagan put it nicely, and I'll read this to you. If Descartes is right that a non-physical mind can cause the body to move, for example, when we decide to go to a concert, then physical energy must increase in and around our body since we get up and go to the concert. In order, however, for physical energy to increase in any system, it has to have been transferred from some other physical system. But the mind, according to Descartes, is not a physical system, and therefore it does not have any energy to transfer. The mind cannot account for the fact that our body ends up at the concert. We could maintain that the principle of the conservation of energy holds, but that every time a mind introduces some new energy into the world, thanks to some mysterious capacity it has, an equal amount of energy departs from the physical universe, thanks to some perfectly orchestrated mysterious capacity the universe has. Unfortunately, such an assumption is totally unwarranted, except as a way of saving Cartesian dualism, and therefore utterly begs the question. I think that's nicely put. So this puts us, since then we've had attempts to solve this problem, like I mentioned earlier. Like, how are we going to account for basically what Owen Flanagan summed up nicely many years later, but was troubling philosophers around Descartes' time as well? How can physical stuff and non-physical stuff, if they both exist, how can they cause changes in one another? This doesn't seem to square with our new science, which they wanted to reconcile these with all of their might. So Leibniz proposed a theory, and it was called parallelism. That's a dualistic theory as well. And what he said was, well, here's how we'll solve the problem. Mind and body, they don't really interact, right? Mental states and physical states occur simultaneously, perhaps coordinated by God in a pre-established harmony. I mean, it sounds kind of funny at this point in history, but what he was trying to do was solve the problem, right? If the problem is how do these two, how does the immaterial interact with the material, just deny that it does and say, it just seems like that, right? These things, our mental lives sync up with our physical lives, but there's no causality between the two. One doesn't cause the other, right? It just seems like it does because God made it that way. And just like I said, it solves the logical problem of causal interaction between mind and body, but it leaves us a little bit wanting, I think. Another dualistic theory is epiphenomenalism. And that's physical states cause mental states, but mental states cannot cause physical states. Mental states are causal byproducts of physical states of the body, related to our bodies roughly the way that shadows are related to us. The appearance that mental states can cause physical states is an illusion. Right? So this is admitting a little bit of causation between the two. It's a dualistic theory. There is minds, there is material stuff, there is immaterial stuff, and there is some causal interaction between the two, but physical states can cause mental states in kind of like it says like a shadow, but it's almost, like a byproduct. That mental states occur as they're a byproduct of our physical states, right? So our physical body is hungry, and then it causes this notion of I am hungry, right? Which this is very commonplace, but that can't happen in reverse, right? Mental states can't cause physical states. And this leaves a little bit to be desired as well, because we like to think, and some of our science has attempted to prove somewhat successfully, that our mental states can cause physical states. But look, this is an important theory to understand, because you see people attempting to solve the original problem that Descartes posed. This is how philosophy and science progresses. Next, we'll look at a few monistic theories. Only one kind of stuff in the universe. So there's materialism that says, hey, here's how you solve the problem. Just get rid of one of them, right? So then there doesn't have to be causal interaction between two kinds of stuff. There's only matter, right? There are no mental states. There are only brain processes, and mental states, quote unquote, are just descriptions of these brain processes from the unusual perspective of the person who has the brain. That's all. Everything can be reduced to material. All is matter. There's no such thing as a mental state. There are physical states of the brain that we then describe with these mentalistic terms, but that this is kind of a hangover from the past. And once we figure out enough from about the brain, we'll stop doing that, right? That this is kind of an illusion. On the other hand, there's the monistic theory. Here's Berkeley, who we studied, right? And he says, here's how you solve the problem. There isn't two kinds of stuff. There's only the ideal. That's known as idealism. That's a monistic theory. Monistic idealism says that there are no physical states. Brain processes, too, are only ideas in the mind. So here you have everything being reduced to just ideas. Again, seems strange, but these people are struggling to cope with the problem Descartes lays out. No, wait. I mentioned this already, but we did Berkeley before, and essayist percipi, right? To be is to be perceived. Even matter is just an idea in the mind, right? So that's represented here. I just wanted to connect this with what we've already looked at. Another monistic theory is identity theory. This is monistic materialism. Mental states and brain states are the same thing, but they're just viewed from different perspectives and described using different words, like water and H2O are the same thing, right? They really aren't. We just used a different language to describe mental states and brain states, right? So let's imagine, you could say here that brain states, your brain could be in a state of what we might call depression, right? It's chemically and electrically in a state of depression, right? And that can be measured, that can be quantified. But then we describe it as a mental state. I'm feeling so depressed. We describe it qualitatively. What identity theory says is that this is a problem. This is an issue of language, and then because of the linguistic matter, we start to believe that these are actually two different things when really they're not. Right? They're one thing, and that's brain states. Right? There's one thing, brain states, and they're identical to mental states. Again, this is a reductionist account of the mind-body problem. It's a materialist account. Functionalism. And this is a monistic account, and it's a materialist account. Mental states consist of certain functions of the brain, which might well be duplicated in non-brain material. The mind simply is what the brain does. This is a slight enhancement of identity theory, really. And functionalism is the ideological underpinning of artificial intelligence, right? Notice this here, right? All that mental states are a way of, again, describing functions of the brain. And if that's the case, then these can be duplicated in non-brain material, like silicone, for instance. So the mind is simply what the brain does. And if all of this is the case, then we might be able to achieve true consciousness in non-biological material. And like I said, this is the working mind-body solution, the mind-body problem solution that underpins endeavors in artificial intelligence. People who strive to create AI subscribe to the functionalist approach. And then real quick, even more modern one, this is our last monistic theory we'll look at here, and that's materialism as well, known as eliminative materialism. Again, it's just a refinement of what we've seen before. And that's the view that matter is fundamental. Again, we've heard this. With sufficient work, neuroscience will be able to reduce all talk of intersubjective states, such as beliefs and desires, to descriptions of non-intentional processes, like neurons firing, neuropeptides being released, etc. And psychological talk could thus be eliminated. What Churchland was saying, and Churchland was pretty much the dominant philosopher at UCSD for a long time and really changed the character of UCSD's philosophy department, which is a real solid department today, that with enough technological and scientific advancement, we will stop talking about our brain states using mentalistic terms. We will stop saying, I'm so sad, or I'm so happy, or I'm so excited, or I'm so grief-stricken, right? Which are all mentalistic terms. And we will eventually start to describe those sensations using scientific terms, right? We'll start to say, and we already do this to a certain extent. There was a time when nobody said, oh, I ran 5 miles, I need to hydrate, right? I was thirsty, or I'm parched. So there's a lot of things that, or for instance, people trying to sell products, instead of saying, like advertisers, instead of saying, let's get the people excited about this product, people are today talking about how can we get a good dopamine release from these consumers so that they'll buy our product. You understand what I'm saying? So what Churchland was saying is that slowly we've got to move toward eliminating all the psychological talk and mentalistic names for brain states and start calling them what they really are. Start calling them, naming them for the actual physical things that are happening in the brain when one is experiencing these emotions. Which again begs the question. But that's our little tour. Let's see here. There are 2 approaches that don't quite fall into either camp, both of which are really cool to study. And in the interest of time here, I'm trying to keep these brief, and we're at 23 minutes. So this will be on the PowerPoint for this lecture. Okay, everybody, just wanted to run through some mind-body theories. Right, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive study of them, but just kind of canvas the terrain and to illustrate that this is an ongoing problem and that people work very hard on this problem, and it still has yet to be fully solved, right? A deeply philosophical problem. Okay,